In order to understand how to set the X-Lights model up, we first need to understand some of the basics of a moving head, how it works, and what some of the terminology and parameters are. This will help you set the model up properly so that when you use it in X-Lights, no matter whose manufacturer of moving head you use, you will understand how to get the most out of it so that when you bring sequences in or you're setting up your own sequences, that the moving head works properly to the way that you want it to run. Now, in this video series, we're concentrating on the YPS Starlight. That is the moving head that we have used in our base package that we supply in our sequences. But our sequences will work with any brand of moving head using the new advanced X-Lights model, which most people are moving to and most sequence vendors are moving to. And there's a lot of reasons why. We'll discuss that in another video, but mainly it has to do with the simplicity of setting up movements versus the old way when we used DMX and had to calculate all the values manually. Now the new X-Light effect will allow us to do a lot of that, and X-Lights does a lot of the work in the background, but that'll be in video 3 of this series. So with that said, let's look at the construction of a moving head. So a moving head has several pieces. The main thing that most people will always see is you'll see the big lens, the big circular thing at the front of the light. That lens helps diffuse the light so that when you turn the moving head on and let the light through, it creates a nice beam that will be seen either in the sky or if you're putting it down on a stage or on a wall. Now, a moving head works a little bit different than a pixel in that when a moving head is turned on, it has a lamp inside of it, and that lamp stays on all the time. So typically what you're going to do is before your show starts, you're going to turn your moving head on and light the lamp. And we're going to talk about how to do that later when we set the model up and in the effects and sequencing part, video part 3. Once that lamp is on, you're going to leave it on the whole night until your show is over, and then you're going to turn the lamp off. Now, what causes the light to shine through the lens are two devices. There's a shutter, and there's what is called a dimmer. Now, the shutter is used to completely block the light out, and what we do is we set that up so that it is in a position to always let light through the moving head. And then there's what we call the dimmer, which basically slides a disc in front of the light to block some or all of it. And that's how you basically get your intensity of the light that shines through the moving head. So those two devices are what you're going to concentrate on when we set up the model and when we're sequencing. Now, you can get different color light out of a moving head, and that's done by what's called a color wheel. And a color wheel is basically, just as it states, it's a wheel that has different color lenses in it that spins inside the light. So when you send a command to the moving head and ask for a color, let's say red, the moving head knows to spin this disc and move it in front of the lamp that's down embedded in the light. It goes through the red filter, and then the light goes up through, and you get the color red. And one thing you need to remember is this isn't like a pixel where you can instantaneously change colors. When you tell the moving head to go from, like, let's say red to orange, if it's on the opposite side of the wheel, there is some amount of time to spin that disc to the orange. Now, typically this is very fast, so you almost won't see the color changes, but you just need to be aware that that happens. And you also only have the ability to have the colors that are on this disc. There's not the ability to have an infinite number of colors. So your moving head manufacturers will give you a list of what the colors are that they have available on their coloring wheel. Now, some other things that are in here that you'll have are a prism. So what the prism does is it allows you to have different looking effects on the light beam. Most of the time, that's only going to be seen if you're shining it on a light or a wall. And it's the same concept of the color wheels. This prism will come down over the lens, it'll rotate in, and it will um, change the characteristics of the light as it hits the lens. And there can be a couple of different discs in here. There's also a gobo. A gobo actually gives you different patterns. So between those two devices, you can get some interesting effects on the light. If you ever watch theater or stages, like you'll see circles and stars and things like that. It all depends on the patterns that they have in the moving heads and these devices that switch in and out. So it's key to understand kind of what these basic pieces are. But the main things we're going to concentrate on are the shutter and the dimmer and the color wheel. Now, when you look at a moving head, it will move in two different directions. It will rotate around the base, and that is what we call panning, and it will be able to rotate some number of degrees. Almost every moving head that's on the market that we use will rotate 540 degrees. In other words, what that's going to do is from the 0 point where you turn it on, it will rotate in a full circle, and then it will rotate another 180 degrees. And we'll talk about why that's important in a couple of minutes. Then you have what's called the tilt, and the tilt is what your moving head moves back and forth on. And these will range from anywhere from 270 degrees, 240 degrees. 180 degrees would be like this would go flat, straight across, and go 180 degrees and then point to the back. So that is what we call our tilt. So the pan and the tilt are two key parameters that we will use when we're sequencing to put the light in a position to create the effects that we want. Now, something to remember also is that almost all moving heads will be rated as either counterclockwise or clockwise rotation. So in other words, when you unbox your moving head and turn it on, it's going to come to its rest position. And typically, what it's going to be is it's going to be facing, wherever your control panel is, it's going to be facing forward towards you, and it's going to be all the way down. So in other words, if this moving head, the YPS is a 270 degree, so it has 270 degrees of swing, it will be pointing down 45 degrees and it'll be facing us out of the page. That's when you turn it on. And it cannot rotate clockwise, so it can't move to the right. So it will only move in a counterclockwise dimension or position until it has enough room to move, back. So in other words, this is the stop point, and that's why it's important to have this 540 degrees, because if you want to be able to swing both ways, you actually have to rotate around 360 degrees. Now, when it's facing forward, it can go 180 degrees that way, and it can go 180 degrees that way. And if it goes that way, that's as far as it'll go, because that's 360 plus 180, which is 540 degrees. So again, it's important to understand, and we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. Now, when you get your moving head, your moving head has a DMX interface list that tells you how many channels that moving head has and what each of those channels do. Typically, your moving heads are going to have anywhere from 16 to 20, 24 channels, and these are going to be specific to the manufacturer. So in this case, this is a YPS layout. So this was the 16 channels that the YPS moving head uses, and it describes which each channel has. So in the case of this moving head, we know that channel 1 is what we call the pan course. We talked about the 0 to 540. When we put a value of 0 to 255 in the pan number, it will rotate anywhere from 0 to 540 degrees. Same with the tilt, because we have 270 degrees. If you go from 0 to 255 in the value of the DMX value, it will go from 0 to 270. You will also have the ability to have what's called fine pan and fine tilt, which typically you're not going to use. They use this a lot in stage and theater productions, What that does, it just gives you the ability to move this, tilt this very little or pan it very little for more precise movement. So it gives you the ability to have a coarser breakdown of movement. So typically we're not going to use those, or those are going to get ignored. This particular moving head has a frost feature, which allows you to frost the light. We won't go over much of that today. This is one of the important parameters. So you need to understand where the shutter channel is, and we'll talk about why in a few minutes, and the dimmer. These two channels are very important. So what we're going to use for the most part when we set this up are the pan, the tilt, the shutter, and the dimmer. Now, the color wheel is also used in the new effect that was added to X-Lights. So we will be going through the setup of that as well. Gobos, focus, prism, we're going to ignore for this purposes of this video, as those are specialty features, and they're all going to be different depending on the moving head. And typically, in the use we use for moving heads and sequence or in our displays, you're not going to see that. The beam of light that you're shining in the air, unless you're on a cloud layer or it's very, very foggy, prism effects and the gobo effects are very, very difficult to see. So we won't be digging too deep into those. And then finally, the other bit that will be important on this particular moving head is channel 16, and that's the lamp control and how we turn the lamp control on and off. And again, we will discuss that later when we talk about sequencing, and then how we turn a lamp on and having an on sequence and an off sequence. So let's talk a little bit about positioning the moving head on the roof of your house. So, like I said, almost all moving heads, and this isn't 100%, so you're going to have to look at the particular moving head that you're using, the particular manufacturer that you're using. When you turn the moving head on, what you want to do is, where is the start position of that moving head on power up? In other words, once power is applied, where does the moving head come to rest? Now, our recommendation is to mount the moving head with the keypad facing to the right of your audience or down your roof line. And the reason you want to do that is when your moving head is up on the roof, the keypads are typically lit and you can see them. So if they're pointed to the right, your audience won't see the lit up keypad and it won't be a distraction on your light show, which in most cases your casual observer isn't going to notice them. But it's just a recommendation for us. We're also talking to the people in the Zoom room and stuff. We're trying to create some standards so that it just makes helping people implement their moving heads a lot simpler. And as they come into the Zoom rooms, we can help get them in a more get them moving along a lot quicker. So but that doesn't mean that you can't, mount them the way you want to mount them. But you're going to need to be cognizant of how you mount it, because this is going to impact how we set the model up in X-Lights. So now, remember what we said with a moving head. A moving head will rotate 540 degrees. So it basically goes around in a circle 1.5 times. So let's assume this moving head here is at rest. It's pointing to the right. This moving head can spin 360 degrees, and then it can spin another 540. In this particular, the YPS is a counterclockwise direction moving head. So what you want to look at is, when I want this moving head to go forward, at rest, I can't move to the right. I'm at this farthest point to the right that I can go. So what I want for what we call the home position, or our center position to the audience, is I want this moving head to be rotated 270 degrees. So, in other words, when X-Lights tells this moving head, okay, I want to start using you in my show, it's automatically going to come around at rest and be pointing towards my audience. So that's 270 degrees. Now remember, we said we can do 540, so I could still go 360 and around even to 540. But now what I've got is I can move that moving head. I can go this way 180 degrees and this way 180 degrees, and it's all within the motion of the moving head. Okay, and that's the key. When we're setting up the movement of the moving head, what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to move the moving head in either direction from the show center, so that when we utilize it, we can put the light where we want it. Now, let's say you take it out of the box and you say, "Hey, I'm just going to mount it on my roof line right towards the front." You can do that. Now, again, remember, at ground zero, you can't move to the left. So if I were to do this, and then I said, okay, I want to start shining my light to the left, this moving head would spin all the way around this way until it got to the point where we wanted to move it, and that's not going to work. So what we have to do is we say, okay, what I need to do is I need to spin this moving head around one full turn, because again, remember, I can travel 1.5 times. So now I can come around this way, and that's a full 540 degrees. And I can come around this way, and I can move in both directions with the moving head, very fluid, and I have nothing stopping me. Let's say that you mount the moving head pointing to the back of your display, saying, so now your keypad's not seen, that's fine, but you want your home position to be in the front, because the new X-Lite effect and everything and model use the front position as what we call the home position. So in this case, again, I can't move this way, so I have to, I can't move this way, so I can't come to the right and do anything this way. But if I tell it to come around 180 degrees and sit, now I can spin 180 this way, and I can come back this way. So again, I have the full range of motion. My audience is down here in the front, so that gives me the full range of the light without hitting any stops or roadblocks. Now, the one position that you don't want or can't mount it in is pointing to the left. And this is for counterclockwise only. If you have a clockwise rotating moving head, all of this is opposite. Okay? So with that being said, let's say you're moving heads here. Well, if I want to point to the front of the audience, if I only moved it 90 degrees, right? So now I'm pointing forward. If I wanted to go this way and go all the way to the back, I can't, because I hit a hard stop. I can go this way, but I can't go this way. So I sit there and say, okay, what happens if I spin 360 degrees around and then I come to the front? Now I can go this way, but I hit the 540 limit on this side, so it will only spin to here and stop. I've hit the full range of the light, so now I can't go back this way. So the key to this is that if you have a counterclockwise moving head, you cannot point it to the left like this. It won't work. If you have a clockwise moving head, then you can't point to the right. This scenario will be the one that it's blocked. All these other scenarios will work. And this will make more sense when we get into setting up the model.